Hello everyone, Juxtaposition here. Today's video is going to be Mort Sahl, CIA Operative, Part 2. Okay, let's stay on the subject of not falling for the potato in your tailpipe. Look, I love comedy. I used to go to comedy clubs when I was in college, university, and I enjoyed myself. And then later, when I went to work for a large international accounting firm, I would visit comedy clubs in whichever city that I was sent to for business. So you should know that I certainly have visited the Comedy Store in West Hollywood. You do know that eventually there became three comedy stores. The premier store was on Sunset Boulevard, in close proximity to the Viper Room and the Whiskey A Go-Go and the murder of Diane Linklater and the murder of Connie Monty and the murder of Jack Cassidy and the murder of Sal Mineo and the murder of River Bottom Phoenix at the Viper Club. That's where the Comedy Store elite, for the top comedians in the world, appear for 15 minutes on a stage, a tiny stage, at the Comedy Store on Sunset Boulevard. And I've been there many times. But there's also a comedy store at UCLA known as Westwood. It's next door to Holmby Hills, where there's the Playboy Mansion operation, which is a CIA operation. And next door to the Playboy Club, we have the Playboy Mansion. We have the Westwood Comedy Club. And then there's the Santa Monica Comedy Club. Those are three clubs, and they were owned by Mitzi Shore, whose real name is Lillian Sedal. She took ownership of the Comedy Store in her divorce from Sammy Shore, who really founded the Comedy Store in West Hollywood. Don't get me started here. You can't get the Whiskey A Go-Go open or the Viper Club or the Pandora's Box or London Fog or Sold Out or Odyssey or Paradise Ballroom or the Seven Seas or Alibaba's or the Kit Kat Strip Club or the Body Shop Strip Club, all nude. You can't get the Whiskey A Go-Go, the Rainbow Room, the Viper Room, the Comedy Store, the Body Shop opened unless you're approved by CIA, okay? So Sammy Shore, the ex-husband of Mitzi Shore, he was the warm-up comedian for Elvis Presley at the International Hotel owned by Kirk Kerkorian, who lives right down the hillside from Sharon Tate's murder, right off North Roxbury Drive. Kirk Kerkorian, who controlled Colonel Parker and Elvis Presley, who lived, Elvis Presley was ensconced in 1969 on the Truesdale Estates at 1174 Hillcrest Road, second house from the dead end. It's almost at the dead end of a cul-de-sac, which winds up really far. And Larry Flint was about 500 yards away from Elvis Presley on a different street in what's called the Birds. And John Lennon and May Pang, they were put in a home, again, not too far from Elvis, within 1,000 yards away. They were put into a controlled housing, which Lou Adler, I think, provided. Lou Adler was the provisional owner of the Roxy Theater, along with Paul McCartney's old friend Peter Asher, the older brother of Jane Asher. Anyway, what I'm painting a picture here, people, is all the entertainment of music, television, film, and comedy is controlled by the bank anthropologist through military intelligence, assassination teams, and the CIA supervising adult supervision at all times. And Mort Sahl could not have a 40, 50, 60-year career, depending on what date you want to begin. I'm going to say 1953 was the beginning of Mort Sahl's career, and you could say that he was continuing on in CIA, Mill Valley, Marin County, at the theater there. Let me get that straight, right? There's a theater in downtown Mill Valley, which is like a 3-block town. It's very small little town for the CIA. And that town has a theater, and it's called the Throckmorton Theater. And allegedly, it's provisionally owned by Lucy Mercer, who was recently interviewed by Deborah Swartz. And I will post that interview link below so you can read it. Mort Sahl comes from a long, exhaustingly long line of Jewish comedians. In fact, there are very few non-Jewish comedians that are allowed to appear on television in the United States. Let me just throw out some names that you've heard of. Jack Benny, Milton Berle, who I've personally met, Jerry Lewis, Gary Shandling, who I've seen in person, Joan Rivers, who I've met in person, Billy Crystal, Albert Brooks, Lenny Bruce, who was murdered in West Hollywood, directly above the Comedy Store, in close proximity to Diane Linklater's murder. Richard Lewis, he's a Jewish comedian. Alan Swibel is a Jewish gentleman who writes jokes for Jewish comedians. Adam Sandler, you might have heard him in some of his pathetic films that he's done. None of them are funny. He appeared on Saturday Night Live. Then we have Jon Stewart, not his real name. It's John Leibowitz. But he changed his name to Stewart so he didn't sound so Jewish. The comedians, of all the names that I mentioned, the two funniest people I ever saw live were Sam Kinison, number one going away. Nobody could shine the shoes of Sam Kinison. If you put Joan Rivers and Jack Benny and Milton Berle and Jerry Lewis and Mort Sahl and Billy Crystal and Albert Brooks, who I do think is a very funny writer, if you put them all together, you couldn't shine the shoes of Sam Kinison, who I don't believe is Jewish, but man, oh man, he can play the piano, he can dance, and he can rip jokes. And he didn't do political satirism. He didn't. He stayed away from it. Ellen DeGeneres, probably funnier than most of the people on this list. Certainly funnier than David Letterman, who I saw live. David Letterman's biggest problem is that, he appeared before Sam Kinison did, and once Sam Kinison went on last, I forgot every person I saw, because you see 4 comedians an hour at Mitzi Shore's Comedy Store, and I forgot all about, David Letterman. This is before he had his TV show, and Sam Kinison just blew him right out of the room. Ellen DeGeneres was really funny. I saw her when she was 19 years old. I don't think she's funny at all now that she's, gay pride woked. She's not funny at all. And you do know that Ellen DeGeneres' disc jockey, Stephen Twitch Boss, was murdered in Encino. Yeah, approximately 1.5 miles away from where Mort Sahl resided. Mort Sahl resided at 4523 Tortana Drive on a cul-de-sac. He wasn't the last house on the cul-de-sac, but in Tarzana, which is Encino. Tarzana is just a different name for Encino. And he's just about 1.5 miles away from where Phil Hartman of Saturday Night Live was murdered, which is about 300 yards away from where Stephen Twitch Boss, Ellen DeGeneres' DJ, where he was murdered. So every address where Mort Sahl lived, is a cul-de-sac. He only lived on cul-de-sacs his entire friggin' life. Once he got, adopted into Hollywood after 1953, Mort Sahl was a cul-de-sac guy, meaning military controlled. He lived at 674 Blankard Place in Claremont, next to Pomona College, part of the Scripps 5-college campus. Pitzer College, Claremont, McKenna College, Claremont School for Girls, Pomona, and probably Harvey Mudd. I think there's 5 colleges, and Mort Sahl was 1 block from the campus on a cul-de-sac. Then he moved, believe it or not, to Tarzana, which is close to, the CBS and NBC studios for television, and where he resided at 4523 Tortana Drive, Tarzana, zip code 91356. Again, that's really close to Terry Kath's murder. It's 5.5 miles away from Terry Kath, 7.5 miles away from where Charlie Miles Maddox Manson was given a 5-acre property in Canoga Park, head of the porn industry. Charlie Manson living 7.5 miles away from Mort Sahl. And we have Gary Francis Powers was murdered on August 1st, 1977, when Mort Sahl resided at 4523 Tortana Drive, Tarzana, 5 miles away from Gary Powers' death scene. Stephen Twitch Boss and Phil Hartman were murdered approximately 4 miles away, but as the crow flies, it's a little less than that. Anyway, what I'm trying to tell you is Mort Sahl was under continuous and constant surveillance and supervision from military intelligence or CIA. He then went on to move to Marietta, Georgia, which is very close proximity to the Air Force Base there, Dobbins Air Force Base. He lived north of the Air Force Base, just a few blocks at 147 Maxwell Avenue. It's a really nice home. It is the last house on a cul-de-sac, a dead-end road, and there he is. There's a couple. He has a neighbor across the street, so he's one of two homes at the dead end of a cul-de-sac. And across the street, I think it's 142 Maxwell Avenue. Mort Sahl's beautiful Georgia house is 147 Maxwell Avenue. You can Google it. It is obscured by a lot of foliage. It's a cul-de-sac. He then went on to move to Mill Valley when he was about 80 years old, in the twilight of his life. And that CIA headquarters for San Francisco is Tiburon, Belvedere, Ross, Greenbrae, Corte Madera. That's home to Bill Graham. Bill Graham, whose name is Wolfgang Janka, a Jewish man from Germany via the Bronx. Home to Barbara Boxer, a Jewish girl from New York City who became a California congresswoman. Nancy Pelosi took over Barbara Boxer's spot. Barbara Boxer's Jewish. She's living in close proximity to Mort Sahl. Mort Sahl's neighbors are Robin Williams, Barbara Boxer, Bill Graham Wolf-Krajanka, who was murdered in 1991, I believe October 25th, 1991, killed at Skaggs Island on Highway 37, but on Skaggs Island property, United States Navy. And that was Mort Sahl's neighbor. And Tom Weisel Partners, Tom Weisel of Tom Weisel Partners, Sean Penn, a Lithuanian Jewish boy living in Kentfield, Ross, across the street from the Ross Valley Players Theater. They have a theater across the street. When I say across the street, I mean St. Francis Boulevard, across the street from College of Marin Community College, where Robin Williams spent time, Sean Penn spent time. Sean Penn, whose brother was murdered in Santa Monica, within a mile of where William Holden was murdered in Santa Monica, along Pacific Coast Highway 1, Ocean Avenue, Santa Monica, where Mitzi Shore has a comedy store in close proximity to Ocean Avenue, Santa Monica. Am I painting a picture here? Mort Sahl's neighbors were mostly Jewish. Mort Sahl's television cohorts were all Jewish. He appeared on television and radio, and he is portrayed as a victim, much in the way as a Holocaust survivor is portrayed as a victim. This is the oldest trick in the book, people. He had a 65-year career. He was not blackballed. Mort Sahl was not blackballed, nor was he murdered. I mean, look what military intelligence and the bank anthropologists do with people who go against the script. They murder you, right? They murder you by the sword with the bayonet. I mean, they had no problem whacking Sharon Tate. She was only 26 years old, and she was disobedient. She wouldn't renew her contract, so they whacked her. They whacked Abigail Folger. She's 25 years old. 2 days shy of her 26th birthday, they whacked her. But they didn't whack Mort Sahl. They whacked Lenny Bruce. Lenny Bruce was early 40s, and he was whacked in North Hollywood, right above the Comedy Store. How come Mort Sahl didn't get murdered? You know, he spoke out on stage against the Warren Commission. Wow, what a novel concept. He brought his newspaper out there to mock the fake news of the day. Hey, no offense to Mort Sahl. I mean, I understand that's a very excellent way to do contemporary comedy stories, is to talk about whatever's, you know, in the front page of the newspapers. I did that when I was 8, 9, 10, and 11 years old as a paperboy. First thing we did was to mock the headlines of the front page of our newspaper. That's what we did. As children, we did that. We had no professional comedy training at all. We just mocked what we saw because it was so hypocritical. It was so out of balance with what we knew to be true. It was poppycock and mendacities. So it was very easy to mock and satirize the front page of a newspaper. We looked to Mad Magazine for more sophisticated humor. And I really do think that Mad Magazine is a higher level of sophistication than Mort Sahl, who just rehashes whatever poppycock was in the news that day. I mean, I like Mort Sahl, and I think he's highly intelligent, and he's well educated in his traffic engineering from USC. I'm not calling him a dummy at all. He's not a dummy. He's articulate. He's well presented. But the thing is, he's a complete clown. He's a complete diversion. Don't you get it? He's telling you things you already know. He's providing your critical thinking, except he never goes far enough. Had he gone far enough or over the edge, which is what this channel's all about, he'd be dead, okay? They're not going to... You see me on national television? You see me have an audience of 2,500,000 subscribers like John Campbell, who has a degree in nursing administration, and he goes by Dr. John Campbell, and all of his viewers think he's a medical doctor when he's not even a nurse. He's not even a nurse. He has zero clinical experience. He has a PhD in nursing administration, and he's on YouTube with 2.5 million subscribers and tens of millions of views, and he's getting paid whatever amounts of advertising sponsorship money, and he's a complete fraud. And in some respects, Mort Sahl is a fraud. He is a fraud. He's a diversion. He's a distraction. He doesn't go far enough. You know, before Mort Sahl was ridiculing the Warren Commission, hey, didn't we have Mark Lane doing that? Mark Levin Lane, who changed his name to sound less Jewish, from the Bronx. Mark Levin from the Bronx, who did a documentary on the John Kennedy assassination, and he flew to Dealey Plaza, Dallas, port facility. He never mentioned that it's a port facility. He didn't find a single person who actually saw what happened. It was just a replay of the Walter Cronkite CBS narrative that, you know, maybe the shots came from the book depository. Mark Levin Lane was very weak. And who paid for his hotel bill, and who bought his meals, and who organized his guests that he portrayed this fake documentary on? He couldn't even get Orville, what was that guy's name that had the other alternative film that got edited and the camera got lost? Orville Nix. He interviewed him, and Orville Nix said, well, yeah, the shots came from the book depository. He goes, how do you know that? He goes, well, that's what the Warren Commission said. And that was the high point of the Mark Levin Lane JFK film. Then he went on to write a book, Rush to Judgment, right? Harold Weisberg wrote a better book called Whitewash, which is what the Warren Commission was. But no offense, if you just read the Warren Commission, you'd conclude it's a whitewash by the time you get past the first paragraph. You know it's a whitewash because they have the conclusion right up front. They just let you know they've already decided. Then the rest, there actually is some information in there that contradicts the narrative, but since nobody actually read all the volumes of the Warren Commission, it doesn't matter, right? It's just like looking at the phone book. Do you really read every page of the phone book or the directories, the 7 county directories? That's what Mort Sahl is. He's a diversion, he's a distraction. I liked him, but you know what? I preferred Sam Kinison. And I preferred Ellen DeGeneres when she was 19 years old. Once you make it in Hollywood, once Sam Kinison signed a contract with HBO, and I took some of my friends to see him in San Francisco with an audience size of 2,500 people, the Orpheum Theater, and let me tell you, it was not a good show. You know, he had Seika, the porn star, and he had Motley Crue or some acid glamorous rock band playing with him, and it was a completely different act, and he had to neutralize the hecklers. Sam Kinison was hilarious with a group of the size of the Comedy Store, 250 people maximum. That's the crowd that is ideal for a Sam Kinison who can do intelligence, clean, no cursing, humor. Play the piano, he can dance, and he can do a routine. And he doesn't need to deal with hecklers because there are very few hecklers in the crowd. Only people have had too much to drink will blurt out. I also saw Andrew Dice Clay. I don't know if you know this. I saw him at the Santa Monica Comedy Store. And you know, his name is Silverstein. Did you know that? Andrew Dice Clay has the same last name as Oliver Stone. It's Oliver Silverstein Stone, and Andrew Dice Clay is Andrew Silverstein. I believe he's from New Jersey. There are no non-Jewish people that run entertainment. They're all 100% Jewish, managed and controlled. And the acts are 95% Jewish. you've got a few like Johnny Carson, and you got Bob Hope, who reads his cue cards, and he doesn't write his own jokes. Bob Hope doesn't write his own jokes, and I'm here to tell you, I doubt that Mort Sahl wrote all of his own material either. They all get help. Once you get appeared on television, they got a team of people do your makeup, your wardrobe, and provide jokes as necessary. And Johnny Carson had his jokes prepared for him, and he contributed to it, and so did Bob Hope, and so did David Letterman, who may not be Jewish, but they're managed by Jewish people. They're in a Jewish-dominated entertainment industry, and I don't care if your name is Milton Berle, which is not his real name, or Jack Benny, which is not his real name, or if your name is Phil Harris, the band leader who is partners with Jack Benny. You're going to live in a CIA-controlled house, surveilled 24/7, and you're under control at all times. And that was my point about Mort Sahl. He was always under control all the time. Every place he lived was an enclave, and he lived on cul-de-sacs, just like Bill Graham did. Just like where they murdered Sharon Tate. She was murdered at the dead end of a cul-de-sac. Bella Drive, which you've been programmed to believe is Cielo Drive. But it's Sunbrook Drive or Bella Drive. Those are your two choices. You could also pick Angelo View Drive, except that you got to go down, a very steep cliff. So let's just stick with Bella Drive, home to Doris Duke, and home to Ruti Valentino before Doris Duke, and Sunbrook Drive, which is home to Timothy Leary, CIA LSD maven, West Point Academy cadet, United States Army intelligence, friend of Oliver Silverstein Stone, who lived at Sunbrook Drive at 10106 Sunbrook Drive, right down the ice plant from where Abigail Folger was bayoneted to death at a dead-end cul-de-sac. Thanks for listening. Have a great day. Feel free to share these videos. Be sure to share part 1 and part 2. Have a good day.